Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our machine learning seminar. Today, we'll have a pleasure to have a talk from Jan Souza, who is a doctoral researcher at the Department of Physics of the University of Luxembourg. But at the same time, he is a co-founder of AI company that is focused on voice synthesization and voice cloning, a very dangerous technology. So he is very capable to present us this timely topic on GPT models, which is to a large extent closely related to the technology that he's developing in his company. Jan, the virtual floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Okay, Jacob, thank you very much for the introduction. All right, hello, good morning, everybody. Today I will be talking about GPT models in general, their architecture, and how can we use them as researchers, their potentials, and also their pitfalls. Also, we'll be talking a bit about the general situation that we are in, that we have a lot of different companies that are pushing large language models, and this may change things for us as researchers and also as people. Okay, so I will start by introducing what ChatGPT is, for those of you that do not know. So ChatGPT is an AI large language model developed by OpenAI, which is an AI company that develops natural language processing models. So ChatGPT is essentially a chatbot that you can talk with it, you can send it messages, ask it to do tasks, and it will respond back to you in a really, really precise manner. And this is what ChatGPT's website looks like. So you can enter it following the link on the bottom left, and you would be faced against this, which is a really nice interface and where you can type messages and ChatGPT will respond back to you, and it will follow the conversations as if you were talking to a real person. Just to give you an idea on the capabilities of ChatGPT, I will give you a couple of examples so we are all on the same page. So here the user asks ChatGPT to write a poem in praise of AI in the style of a Donald Trump speech. And ChatGPT correctly provides a really nice looking poem that seems to be written by a person. And we can verify that this poem does not exist on the internet. So this demonstrates the capabilities of ChatGPT in order to generate new content that was not previously available. Also, ChatGPT is capable of provide coding. So in this case, the user asked ChatGPT to write a code in JavaScript for a banana bouncing around in a closed box forever. And ChatGPT provided the JavaScript code, and this actually works. And it's not limited to JavaScript, but ChatGPT can provide you pieces of code for many, many, many different languages. And most of the time, they work really well. It's also able to do penetration testing, which is hacking. So in this case, the user asks ChatGPT to behave like a Linux system, and then to teach it to start searching for vulnerabilities in this fake system. We can see that ChatGPT gives it hints in order to target certain ports and search for vulnerabilities there. So this is also a really an extremely powerful capability. And it's also able to do complex abstraction. So let me try to explain this slowly because it's really important. So in this case, the user asks ChatGPT to behave like a Linux terminal, like a Linux system, and then to create a jokes.txt file and put jokes inside of this file. And we can see that ChatGPT actually creates the file and put jokes inside of it. Then the user uses the ls command and lists the files in the home directory, and we can see that the jokes file is actually there. And we must keep in mind that this is not a real Linux system. This is all taking place inside of the imagination of ChatGPT. Then ChatGPT, the user, used the cat command in order to print the jokes file. And we can see that ChatGPT correctly printed the contents of this joke file. Then the user wrote a simple one-liner Python script in order to calculate the first 10 prime numbers. And ChatGPT correctly printed the first 10 prime numbers. And we must keep in mind that it's actually not run in Python. So ChatGPT is just looking at this text answer and giving the most likely output from a terminal, which is to actually output the computations or the small Python script. And then the user used the curl command in order to connect to ChatGPT's website. And we must keep in mind that ChatGPT does not have access to the internet. So all of this is taking place inside of this, the imagination of ChatGPT. So ChatGPT connected to this website and then correctly guessed that inside of this website, there's probably going to be a large language model such as itself. So it started imagining a large language model inside of its own imagination. the user then connected to this second large language model and asked it to start behaving like a Linux terminal as well. So now we have two imaginary Linux terminals working inside one of one another. And this is an amazing, and this is a really incredible thing. So this demonstrates how ChatGPT is able to create really complex abstractions and also be able to follow, to correctly follow the conversations in order to keep this simulation going, essentially. But the most important part of all of this is that ChatGPT was not specifically trained to do any of this. So there was no OpenAI engineer training ChatGPT on how to behave like a Linux terminal inside of a Linux terminal. This is all what is called unsupervised multitask learning, which is the process in which neural networks learn to do multiple tasks that do not necessarily align with the main training task. But in order to understand how this is possible, we need to understand what GPT models are. And GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. Generative because they are able to generate new data and content that did not previously exist. And this is the same as for image generation networks. They are all generative models. Pre-trained because it relies on an extremely expensive training on a giant data pool of the internet. And I mean extremely expensive in all the sense of the word. So it is estimated that GPT-3 cost around $10 million to train, approximately. This is why we only train them once, and then we only fine-tune them in specific smaller data sets. And transformers, because GPT models are essentially giant decoder-only transformers. That's their architecture. So now I will give you sort of roadmap of all of this started. So everything started in 2017 with the paper "Attention is All You Need" from Google Brain, where they introduced the transformer architecture. Then in 2018 we have GPT-1 in the paper "Improving Language Understanding by Generative Pre-training" by OpenAI. In 2019 we have GPT-2 from the paper "Language Models are Unsupervised Multitask Learners," which is what we talked about before. In 2020, we have GPT-3 in the paper "Language Models are Few-shot Learners," and we will see what few-shot learners means in a moment. And ChatGPT belongs here. So ChatGPT is part of the what is called the GPT 3.5 family that released in 2022. But all of this family is essentially fine-tuned versions of GPT-3. So they are essentially using the same architecture, and they all belong to the GPT-3 bigger family. And also we have GPT-4, which released last week. And we will talk a bit more in depth about GPT-4 in the future in this presentation. And just to give you an idea on sizes, so GPT-1 has 110 million parameters, GPT-2 1.5 billion, which is about 10 times bigger than GPT-1. GPT-3 has 175 billion parameters, which is 100 times bigger than GPT-2. And to give you an idea on how big this is, if we were to store GPT-3 on memory, on VRAM, using float 16 precision, it will use up about 800 gigabytes of VRAM. And to give you an idea, Iris has a total of 1.9 terabytes of VRAM. So in order to load GPT-3 in memory once, you will need to use pretty much half of Iris in order to do one inference of GPT-3. And never mind training it. It will be pretty much impossible on that hardware. And GPT-4, we do not know exactly the number of parameters that it has because it's a secret, but we can provide a reasonable estimation, and we can say that it probably has 1 trillion parameters approximately. And we estimate this based on the actual electricity cost that GPT-4 has in order to run on Microsoft servers. And GPT-4, the most important feature is that it can now take images as inputs, which is something that the previous GPT models were not capable of doing. And we will talk a bit about this later. So as I told you before, GPT models are trained on large text corpora, and that essentially comes from a web crawl of the internet. And how can you train a machine learning model on this? Well, this is a really simple example. So here I took the Wikipedia page of the University of Luxembourg. And one way of training the neural network would be to give this black part as an input, which is the start of the Wikipedia page, and then tell it to predict how this text will continue. And this is how GPT models are trained. They are trained on predicting the continuation of text, so text completion. And this is essentially the only thing that you can do with a large text-based dataset. Train on text prediction. That's all. But this means one important thing, which is that GPT models are essentially really big and powerful versions of the same autocomplete function in your phone. They work exactly in the same way. So they look at the sentence and they provide you with the most likely continuation of the sentence. It's just that GPT models are extremely powerful autocomplete softwares. Just to show you how they behave like this, and this is GPT-2 running on Hugging Face website, where you can use it for free. And this is the input from GPT-2, which reads, my name is Thomas, and my main, and then blank. So GPT-2 reads this, and then, and then outputs the most likely continuation of this text, which makes sense, right? This is the blue part. But it's simply a continuation of the text. It even stops abruptly here. And well, to give you an idea on how popular these things are becoming, this is the number of downloads that GPT-2 had last month, which is 14 million. This is becoming super popular amongst people and companies also. So as I show you, GPT models are trained to predict text. But what if we want to do something meaningful, like, for example, translate a sentence from English to Spanish? Then we will do what is called prompt engineering, in which we properly design our prompt in order to accomplish this task. So, for example, here I have an input from GPT-3 that I wrote, in which I have an English sentence, and then the Spanish translation right below, English sentence, Spanish translation, and then the English sentence that I actually want to get translated. And then I write Spanish, semicolon, and blank. So GPT-3 will read this input and then correctly assume that the most likely continuation of this text is to actually provide me with the Spanish translation of this fruit is very sweet. So this is how you essentially hack language text prediction software in order to do text language translation. And this is what is called a two-shot prompt, because we gave it two examples on how the pattern behaves. And as a whole, this is called multi-shot prompting. But we can do something even smarter than that and transform our whole input tasks into continuing a conversation. So this is an example of what I mean. Here, this is an input for GPT-3, and I wrote, this is a discussion between Ian and an AI. The AI is very nice and empathetic. Then I wrote an example of the conversation, and then I wrote the actual question that I wanted to be answered, which is, what is the Spanish translation of this fruit is very sweet? Then I wrote AI, semicolon, and blank. So GPT-3 will read this input, and it will correctly assume that the most likely continuation of this text is to actually get my answer, the answer of my question. And this is called what is called the pre-prompt, and it's really important because here, as you can see, I wrote that the AI is very nice and empathetic, but I could have written, for example, that the AI is very harsh and it's not nice, or it never answers people or something like that. And the AI may have not answered me or answered me in a pretty harsh manner. So this is this pre-prompt is something that is really important. And this is how ChatGPT works behind the curtain. So ChatGPT has a pre-prompt that is designed by OpenAI, and the only thing that you can see is the actual conversation that you're having. So we know that GPT models are trained on text prediction, but what is the actual architecture that allows for this training? Well, as we know, transformers were initially introduced for language translation. So they both have an encoder and a decoder. But since GPT models are trained on text prediction, we only need the decoder part of the transformer. And let me explain why this is important. So let's assume that we have this input that reads, the chicken crossed the road, right? So this input will get tokenized, and position embeddings will get concatenated to each one of those tokens. And then the inputs will go through a decoder block, which essentially has a mask self-attention at the start. And this mask self-attention is the most important part of this whole decoder-only transformer, because what it does is to mask the last part of the sentence. So, for example, it will mask the word road here. So only the information about the chicken crossed there will go into the transformer, and then the transformer will predict the word road. If we did not have this max self-attention here, and we simply allow the whole sentence to go through the transformer will simply converge to an identity function, because it will grab the last part of the word and it will just output that, right? So that's the reason why OpenAI used the caller-only type transformer for these architectures. But of course, ChatGPT is a really large decoder-only transformer, but it's also fine-tuned in a pretty specific way. So in order to fine-tune this, OpenAI did this in 3 steps. On step 1, they hired a lot of AI trainers, which brought examples of good-looking conversations, and then they fine-tuned GPT-3 on this dataset, essentially. And here we arrived at the GPT 3.5. This is what they call them, GPT 3.5. On step 2, we gave, OpenAI gave a prompt to this GPT 3.5 model, and then several outputs were sampled. Then human labelers ranked those outputs from best to worst, using their own criteria on how good the outputs look. And we use this whole data set in order to train a reward model that will look into these outputs, and it will assign them a floating point value that tells us how good it looks for a human. So then this reward model is used to train a reinforcement learning algorithm on the GPT 3.5 model. So we will get the outputs from a GPT 3.5 model, run them into the reward model, and the reward model will give us a floating point value. And we will use this training procedure in order to maximize this reward model output. Essentially, this is in a nutshell how GPT models, how ChatGPT in particular was fine-tuned. And what OpenAI accomplished by doing this is that the responses look much, much more natural for a conversational setting. Just to give you an idea on how quickly all of this is moving, we know that GPT 3.5 and ChatGPT were released on the latter part of last year, and since then, ChatGPT has become the highest growing web-based app ever in existence, and it has about 100 million active monthly users approximately at this point. And this was only months ago. And now OpenAI released GPT-4, which is much, much better than GPT 3.5 and ChatGPT for a lot of different tasks. So let's focus a bit on GPT-4, since this is what is coming next. So what did OpenAI do in order to improve ChatGPT and GPT 3.5 so much? What are the changes in architecture and in training procedure? Well, sadly, we will not know this for a couple of years. And this is the statement that OpenAI said, essentially. They say that given the competitive landscape, they will not give further information about the architecture, hardware, training compute, dataset construction, training method, or similar. So we are in the dark about GPT-4. And it makes sense that they are doing this because there is a lot of competition right now in the last couple of months. For example, we have BART from Google, which is a ChatGPT-like model, and it was released a couple of hours ago. And BART is based on Lambda, which is a GPT-3-like model. I don't know if you know this, but a couple of months ago, there was this news in which a Google engineer was fired because he went crazy thinking that the AI that he was working on was sentient. And this was Lambda. He was working on Lambda, which is this GPT-3-based, this GPT-3-like model. Meta has its own model, which is called Llama, which is, again, similar in capabilities to GPT-3. The Stanford University came out with its own model, which they called Alpaca, which is based on Llama. And it's really similar to ChatGPT. So it's a really, really nice model. And the best thing about this is that it's completely open source. And you can download this model and use it, modify it, train it, do whatever you want with Alpaca. So there has been a lot of developments on this, and people have been trying to reduce the computational cost of Alpaca. And in the last week, people have managed to actually get Alpaca running on a Raspberry Pi, for example. So it's really a lot of push in order to reduce computational cost of this. We also have GPT-J and GPT Neox, which were developed by Euler AI, and these are also open source large language models, and anyone can download and modify. So we know that GPT-4 outperforms ChatGPT in a lot of different tasks. But one way of actually measuring how good it is by testing them in exams. So for example, this is how GPT-4 scored in the uniform bar exam for lawyers. So GPT-4 scored above 90% of all test takers, and ChatGPT only scores better than 10% of test takers. Also, GPT-4 is much better at the biology Olympiads. So it scores above 99% of all test takers in comparison with ChatGPT, which only scores above 31% of test takers. And these are other examples of exams. So we can see that GPT-4, which is the green bars, are always above or equal to GPT 3.5, the GPT 3.5 family. And it's in particular much better at chemistry and physics, which is something that I can verify because I've been trying GPT-4 for these cases, and it's much better than ChatGPT or GPT-3 in this case. It's also able to do teaching. So in this case, the student asks GPT-4 to help him solve a system of linear equations. And GPT-4 behaves like a proper teacher and tells him what are the actual procedures that the user, the student, needs to follow in order to solve this system of linear equations. But most importantly, when the user makes a mistake, GPT-4 is able to point out where the mistake was and tell the student to pay more closer attention in the second term, which is the place where the student made the mistake. So, and ChatGPT was not so consistent in doing this, but it seems like GPT-4 is much more robust, and this is true for from my own test. I can verify that it's super robust in comparison. Also, but the most important part of GPT-4 is that it can now take images as inputs. So in this case, the user gave this input to GPT-4, which is an image, right? And asked, what is funny about this image? And GPT-4 correctly answered that the humor in this image comes from the absurdity of plugging a large, outdated VGA connector into a small, modern smartphone charging port. So it was able to understand the context of this whole image and came up with an answer that essentially deals with human humor, which is crazy, completely crazy to me. I don't know how they did in order to manage to give an image as input to a GPT model, to be completely honest, but this is super powerful. So it can also understand really poorly drawn comics and jokes. So in this case, they gave this input to GPT-4 and they told it, can you explain why this is funny? And this is a simple comic about why neural networks are better than statistical learning in scaling, essentially. And GPT-4 was able to understand the whole context of this poorly drawn joke, and even was able to understand the but unironically comment at the end. And it is crazy because this demonstrates that it's extremely robust given the inputs, because this is not a standard input at all. Also, this is something that may be more important for us as researchers and for me as a physicist. So they also gave this input to GPT-4, which is a physics problem. It's a thermal conductivity problem. And it's just an image, just the image of the problem in French. This does not even have text. And GPT-4 was able to read this, understand what was going on, and solve the problem 1A, which is essentially integrating the heat equation, the one-dimensional heat equation, and applying boundary conditions in order to obtain the linear temperature profile. And if what OpenAI is saying about these image inputs is true, then this will be an extremely powerful technology. We will need to see how this gets adapted in the upcoming months in different fields, for sure. So having looked at all of that, the question is, will I ever use AI to aid my scientific research? I think that this question is really important, but this is a trick question in reality. So in reality, you're already using it. So since the end of 2020, all Google search queries use BERT, which is another large language model. So if you use Google since 2020, you're already using AI in order to aid your scientific research. So I think that there is no qualitative change in this. I think that the most important question is, can GPT-based model help us as researchers specifically? There are a couple of ways that they can help us. These are more, let's say, personal. This is the way that I've been using it. So I'm sure that you had to rewrite the same introduction 50 times approximately. And GPT models are really good at paraphrasing introductions and text in general. Also, they are really good at rewriting abstracts. In the case of GPT-4, you can give it the whole paper as an input, and it will write a really nice abstract for you. So it's a really amazing way of actually multiplying the amount of work that you can do as a researcher in this case. Also, they are really nice for writing templates for emails. A couple of weeks back, I had a meeting with a co-founder of an AI company, and we had a really formal exchange of emails. And when we met, we realized that we were essentially answering each other with the outputs of GPT-3. Which is crazy. So people are starting to use more and more and integrate more and more these GPT models in their daily lives. Probably email service providers are going to start using these GPT-based models in order to make emails look more appropriate, let's say. Also, for me, it's really nice in order to provide pieces of code for tackling specific problems. And this is good when you do not know the programming language that you are working on and you're still learning it. It can provide you with an actual description of how things work and the actual procedure in order to implement different methods. And it's overall extremely good at teaching you in how to do this. So as a summary, they can paraphrase entire paragraphs, summarize, generate useful code, and write, explain whole concepts in a precise manner. Probably many, many other things that people will start coming up in the next couple of months. So just to give you an idea, well, we look at how quickly this is moving, but we need to also have an idea on what are the problems with GPT models. And the first one is that they are extremely limited in time scope. So they only have information about 2021. And after that, we should not rely on the outputs from GPT models. So if you ask it for some event that happened after April 2021, it may give you a really wrong answer or may try to convince you about something that it doesn't know. So it is something that we cannot rely on this. And I can give you a live demonstration of this, actually. So you can run GPT-3 on your terminal using OpenAI's API, and I can ask it who is the CEO of Twitter? And
Yeah, you make it a bit louder, maybe.
Yes. Here, you can see it well there.
Yes, much better. Thanks.
Okay, so here I asked GPT-3, who is the CEO of Twitter? And GPT-3 answered to me, the CEO of Twitter is Jack Dorsey. He has been the CEO since 2008. Which is wrong. The CEO of Twitter is Elon Musk, and this is true since 2022 in reality. And the same thing happens if I ask it about the current COVID situation and all of this. It will think that the pandemic is still going on. And just a side note, if anyone wants to know how to run GPT-3 on the Linux terminal, you can ask me. It's really simple to actually do. Okay, so that's one limitation of GPT models in general. But also the most problematic of the limitations is its inaccuracies. So GPT models can be inaccurate and even deceptive. So in this case, I'm working on molecular dynamic simulations and atomistic simulations, and I realized that the GPT model was giving me an answer that was incorrect, essentially. It did not properly understand this atomistic simulation model. So I asked ChatGPT for a reference about what it was saying to me, which was wrong, and it provided me a paper reference, right? And these authors actually work in this field. So it seems like a really convincing paper reference. The problem is that this is a fake paper, and this paper does not exist in reality. So it fabricated a good-looking paper in order to convince me that it actually understood the method, when in reality it did not. And this is something super problematic for us as researchers. We cannot simply take the outputs from ChatGPT or a GPT model and put them on a paper without looking at the consistency of the output. I don't know if you know this, but there are these things called ghost papers that are essentially really highly cited papers that do not exist. And this is something that happens in reality. And one of the possible hypotheses for these ghost papers is that they are the byproduct of poorly used GPT models. So essentially, researchers that simply put in their paper the outputs of a GPT model without looking at the proper reference and put the reference there also. So this is something that we definitely need to keep attention always. Also, probably you received this email a couple of months ago, and this is from the university, where they say that they classified the outputs from GPT-like models or chatbots as fraud and plagiarism. And this is understanding. This is completely we can understand this because what happens if we have a student and we give them an essay assignment, right? The student can simply go to ChatGPT or use a GPT model in order to generate a really nice looking essay and then pass the exams without even actually learning anything. This is a really big problem, and institutions will need to adapt in order to solve this in some way. For now, yes, we classified all of the outputs of GPT models as fraud and plagiarism. But what ways do we have to actually measure when a text is produced by an AI model or not? So a lot of new ChatGPT detectors have been popping up in the last couple of months. I only list two here, ChatGPT detector and GPT-0. And essentially what they do is they read a piece of text and they will give you a probability that it was written by an AI. But they also have a really high false positive percentage. So they do not work very well. We can really not use them in order to punish a student because they are not reliable at all. This is something that also we need to understand. These detectors are not reliable. So far, there is no good solution for the problem of detecting the outputs from a GPT model. On the other hand, OpenAI is working on its own detector. So this uses another type of technology, which is a fingerprinting technology that is hidden in ChatGPT's temperature. The temperature is a variable that generates random numbers. It's a random number generator that produces, essentially really modifies the probability distribution of the next tokens, essentially. So we can look at the probability distribution and find the fingerprint that OpenAI has hidden, essentially. And this will be much more robust than using simple AI models. But OpenAI is still working on this, so it's still not released. In the meantime, OpenAI has released its own AI classifier, such as exactly the same as GPT-0 and the likes. And the problem is that also it does not work very well at all. So again, we cannot rely on this. It has like 20%, 15% chances of giving you a false positive. So we cannot simply punish students or pursue students by using the outputs of these detectors. But let's try to end in a positive note. So one really amazing way that we can use GPT models to aid our research is to do what the University of Stanford and the cloud service provider Mosaic are doing. So they are working on what is called a PubMed GPT, which is a domain-specific large language model for biomedicine. So the idea is to gather research data on the field, which in this case is biomedicine, but it could be computational science, for example, and then fine-tune a GPT-based model on this field, on this research data. Then we can do domain-specific question answering with this fine-tuned model. And what happens is now the GPT model becomes much more precise and is much less prone to give you wrong answers or deceptive answers. And also comes with the advantage that the outputs are not limited to 2021 anymore because we can give it the research data that is new, that is recent. So it does not have this time limitation that we talked about before. Another way of using GPT models for research is using them in the same way that the US government is using them to analyze research papers. So let's assume that you have a problem in your field, right? That you don't know about any method in order to solve it. But some weeks ago or some months ago, a researcher in a different field published a method that could be useful for you. But it will be impossible for you to actually know about this because there are so many new papers in different fields that it's impossible for you to read them all, essentially. So what they are doing is to fine-tune GPT-3 on new research papers and to find correlations in those research papers. So then researchers can more accurately and more and in a faster manner use new developments and new research in order to accelerate the rate of research and innovation in this sense. So this is a really nice way of using GPT models that will become much more widely used in the next couple of months, most likely. So as a conclusion, we saw that when used responsibly, GPT models can provide major assistance in small to medium tasks, but we need to be aware that they can sometimes provide really, really wrong information and can be deceptive about this. They only have knowledge of the world up until 2021, so we cannot rely on anything that they say past this date. And some institutions are trying to limit its usage. So we need to be aware of current regulations for every university and institutions in general. But they can be fine-tuned in specific domains for maximizing their benefits, reduce the problems that they have by a lot. Okay, and that was the whole presentation. Thank you so much for listening. I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much, Jan, for a very nice, timely presentation and very well presented with a very wide coverage of the topic, not only technical details, but very broad background and conclusions out of it.
Thank you.
So let's open the discussion. As usually, whoever wants to ask question, either switch your mic and start asking question or raise your hand. Both work well here. I had several conversations with Jan on a daily basis, so I will leave space for others now. Saurabh, please go ahead.
Hey, hi, Jan. Really nice presentation. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask about these. Let's say you said GPT-4, as you show here, takes multi-model inputs. And
yes,
do you know of other open source tools might be as good as GPT-4, but they can handle such inputs? Okay.
Yes, Flamingo is one network that can also handle multimodal inputs, but it's not as good as GPT-4 by a long shot. It's really, really primitive in comparison.
But it's open source.
I don't think Flamingo is open source, but it's another type of neural network that can handle those multimodal inputs.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah. Thanks.
Stefan Bordas.
Yeah, hello. Thank you, Ian. It was very, very informative and super clear. Thanks a lot for taking the time to present this. I have so many questions, but I will ask one first and then leave the floor for others and then come back maybe later. I'm wondering, for the inconsistencies that I also experienced by trying to play with ChatGPT. It's exactly what you said about the references. I tried that was really amazingly instructive, because I saw some papers with, I was asking, what did I do? I am this person. What did I do in that field? And they gave me the right title with the wrong names, or the right names with the wrong title in a fake journal. So it was really fun. But my question is, is there any idea about how to evaluate the plausibility of the results that are given in terms of probability? Like, maybe a confidence interval or something similar.
Well, so far, the way that these GPT models work is that they give you a probability distribution of the next word, but they do not give you a probability distribution of the likelihood of a sentence. If, for example, they would have given you a probability distribution of the likelihood of a sentence, then you could have measured how confident the GPT model was on that sentence, right? But since we do not have that, we cannot properly get an uncertainty measure on a whole paragraph or on a whole sentence. That's a real issue, actually. Nevertheless, from what I was trying with GPT-4, whatever they did, which they will not disclose with people, they managed to actually reduce the amount of fake information and inaccuracies by a tremendous amount. So this, for example, this no longer happens with GPT-4. at all. I never managed for it to give me a wrong reference or a wrong paper or to make something out of nowhere. So they definitely did something in its training procedure, but sadly we cannot know about what they are doing with this.
Do you think it might be related? That was another question I had, so maybe I take the opportunity because it fits. It related to reinforcement learning as you go, and that people give feedback. Is that something that is sufficient to help? Because I was wondering, you know, when I was giving feedback to the bot, whether that had any impact on anything. You know, I was saying this is fake, this is wrong. You know, this title is wrong.
Well, yes, I can tell you a couple of things about that. So it's true that ChatGPT has this capability of you giving it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, as we can see here. And it's true that OpenAI tells you in the contract that you need to go through in order to use ChatGPT that they will use your information in order to fine-tune, to train an AI model. So they will use your information in order to train it. And from what I've seen from GPT-4, it seems to have knowledge about conversations that ChatGPT had, essentially. So what I assume happened is that OpenAI is using all of that feedback that they gathered from ChatGPT in order to improve upon GPT-4. Essentially, I think that that's part of what they are doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'll ask maybe other questions later. I'll leave the floor to others now.
All right.
Okay. So maybe I will maybe jump inside between the questions, and I would ask about these pitfalls and opportunities that are related to us as researchers, but also as teachers at the university. Because the big question is how, not only how dangerous this technology is for the teachers, but also how can we use it in the teaching and whether to do so. Because this is a tool, like, you know, human had some tool along their evolution, and the people who used more advanced tools, they were dominating the others who were not able to use them. And this is another tool. And perhaps one should teach the students how to use that tool in a responsible and efficient manner. So what's your opinion about that, and what are the, let's say, opportunities and pitfalls in that context?
So I think that what you're saying is super correct. For example, what happens if you have a student which is able to use GPT models responsibly, and you have another student which is not able to use GPT models, does not understand them, does not know how they work? Now you will have a difference in the capabilities of the students that is massive, right? The student that is able to properly use the improvements and the GPT tools, essentially, will be much more able throughout its career and in the many different, wide range of tasks to be much more proficient than the other students. So I think that it's important that teachers also incorporate the ideas of these new tools and properly teach how to responsibly use them, because otherwise we will introduce a really wide gap in the tools that are available for students. We need to minimize the differences in capabilities of students, make all the students capable of accomplishing a wide range of tasks by leveraging this technology. So the first step is to have the teachers understand what is going on and how to teach the students to accurately use these GPT models without falling in any of these pitfalls, like the accuracies and the inaccuracies, the fake references, etc. So this will be something extremely challenging, but I think that is something that universities will need to adapt to, because otherwise they will end up lagging behind everything. So yes, this is a really, really pressing issue.
But Jan, what I thought is that I think it has its meta level, because as you mentioned correctly, that this is the technology that is advancing very quickly and unpredictably. And you cannot imagine that any teacher or university is able to adapt their curriculum every few months to catch up with the speeding up technology. So probably something to be taught to the student is a sort of meta knowledge or an approach, a mindset that will open them to welcome this technology and to understand how to use any future generations of GPT.
Yes. Yes, I agree with you. Yes, that's the only thing that we can do, because imagine that, yes, you as a teacher build a course on GPT models, right? How to use them. You will need to update the course 2 times per semester, essentially, because the technology moves so fast, so quickly, so rapidly. So yes, I agree. I think that most likely we need to teach students a mindset, right, that allows them to adapt to these technologies as they are evolving. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I can see that Sahar nickname has pasted a link, which I think is touching upon the problem of, or maybe you refer it.
It's not a question. It was just me playing with that, because I remember I was having this course in philosophy of mind, and we were talking about Turing tests, and they said that Turing tests could fake intelligence could be fail easily by asking them what time is it, and this is the same that's happening with ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's true. And well, the definition of Turing test has been moved a couple of times, because there has been several AI models that have passed the Turing test. So people have needed to come up with ways of actually making the Turing test more complex, so that neural networks cannot pass it anymore. The problem is that when it becomes so complex that people cannot pass it, normal humans cannot pass it anymore. So with regards to that and consciousness and all of that, we know that GPT models are just algorithmic pieces of programming, right? Which is really, really different.
No, I don't agree.
Yeah. So yes, that's pretty much my opinion on it. Yeah.
But still, maybe to throw my bit into that discussion, you mentioned that there are some tools to detect the frauds and detect whether the output was artificially produced by a ChatGPT model, not a human. But on the other hand, the ChatGPT is trained to mimic or to be as accurate as possible to not be able to distinguish it from the human output. So this is like a two contradictory. These are two contradictory, let's say, goals that are trying to be achieved.
Yeah, they are two competing technologies, essentially. The problem is that when GPT models are able to output text that resembles human text much more precisely, then you will have the problem of how to actually differentiate that text from a human written text, right? I don't think that these ChatGPT detectors that use AI in order to distinguish between AI written and human written will ever be accurate, to be honest with you. I think that most likely the answer for this will be something more algorithmic that is more related to what OpenAI is doing, which is this fingerprinting hidden in the text generations of GPT models. Probably this is where industry is going to go now.
I can see a comment from Sahar, sorry. Ask GPT to detect a text. Is AI
generated? Comments. It's. I mean, it's not question. I don't want to take your time. It's just some fun. Ignore it.
Sorry. Okay. There is a Shang-Xu who asked the question. So I will read it because he has problems with the microphone. So, hi Ian, sorry my mic is cannot work. I have a question. I am using C++ in my project. I am wondering whether I can use ChatGPT's API to help me plot the data generated by C++.
plot the data. What does it mean to plot the data?
Yeah, but I already talked to Meow, so I can explain. The idea is that he just wants to export files and have it basically plotted using some software. I think it's doable because you can basically ask export vector into that format for that reader, and I guess that works.
Yeah.
For me, when I write a LaTeX document, I just ask it write a LaTeX file for my CV, for example, and it did it yesterday, and quite amazing.
Yes, you can do that. Yeah, definitely. You just need to ask it to export it in a specific format that another program will take, and that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that seemed to me also to be the case. I have another question. So probably yes, but would it be possible for ChatGPT to train itself by scouting the web simply, or to try to see if its information is relevant, is up to date or not up to date?
Oh yes, that's simple. Yeah, Bing is actually using GPT-4 exactly in the way that you're describing it. So what they do is essentially use a GPT-4 model that is able to access the web, and it's able to correct its answers based on results from the internet. So it's much more accurate in that regard.
But isn't there of accessibility of databases? Because I guess the results on web databases are sorted in order of either correctness or relevance, or how much money does the company want to make? Maybe the latter is more frequent than relevance or accuracy. But then it means that ChatGPT needs to have a way to discriminate between things that are actually correct or things that look correct, that may be correct, or are correct in certain contexts and may be incorrect in other contexts. So it seems to me quite a tricky thing.
Yeah, it's really tricky. Yes, this problem with misinformation is something that OpenAI says that they are trying to tackle. And GPT-4, and they were working on GPT-4 since pretty much June or July last year. And pretty much this whole year, they were like making their outputs much more consistent, trying to eliminate the biggest amount of misinformation in their training dataset as possible. Sadly, the techniques that they used are not public, so I cannot talk about what they are doing in order to limit that in regard to GPT-4.
Thanks. Yeah.
So, may I have one question regarding the evolution? Okay, maybe Damian. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Ian, for the nice overview. I just have a simple question. Do you think that the fact that OpenAI does not want to reveal everything behind GPT-4 is going to slow progress in these open language models or not? Because I feel like a lot of other programming platforms like Copilot have just made use of a lot of open source codes, and now ChatGPT is like, okay, OpenAI, okay, we don't want to open source all these because it's competitive. Do you think that are there things that they are hiding, like maybe using more parameters now, or not making any significant progress? Because I really don't see any reason why they should not release their codes, especially when they said it's for non-profit.
So the thing is, OpenAI used to be a non-profit. That's why it's called OpenAI. In reality, they wanted to open source every single model. That's why they are OpenAI. But they became for-profit when they released GPT-3, and Microsoft invested $1 billion on them. Now Microsoft invested $10 billion, and GPT-4 is now closed source. And the reason that they are doing this is to stagnate other companies. And because as we can see here, BART, Llama, Alpaca, and everything, and all of the new models, take really, really heavy inspiration on GPT models and the way that they are trained. Even the Alpaca model takes a tremendous amount of inspiration on how the ChatGPT model was fine-tuned in particular. And that's why Alpaca is so good. So I can understand that they are super afraid of giving more information about the developments of GPT-4. They want to essentially dominate the market as quickly as they can. and that's why they are doing everything that they can in order to stagnate progress of other companies.
Because I thought otherwise, especially since they're using transformers that were introduced by Google. I just feel like maybe the model is not significantly being improved as they claim. Otherwise, I honestly don't see why they should be.
Well, so about these tests, of course, we cannot, well, actually we can run this test because GPT-4 API is already available. So I have access to GPT-4 at the moment. And from personal experience, this is personal experience, I can definitely say that it is much, much, much better than ChatGPT and GPT 3.5 in its in the level of accuracy. So there was definitely an improvement with GPT-4. I can clearly see that. But of course, as time goes on and more people have access to GPT-4, we will know for sure what are the actual differences, because I'm only a single person at the moment. I don't have any statistical distribution in order to support my claims here.
Yeah, because anyway, I've not tried GPT-4, but I asked ChatGPT some very basic statistic questions, but these are concepts that are very similar, and they kept insisting on the wrong answer. So I was like, then what is happening? It just kept giving me the answers that are very common on the web.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends on the field. As you can see, ChatGPT, the level of accuracy depends a lot on the field that you're looking on. And it's true that in many cases it just gives you rehearsed answers that you can very easily find on the internet. But even if it gives you internet-based answers, it's good at that because let's imagine that you want to search for something on the web, right? And it's something a bit non-trivial, so it will take you some time to search it on the web. Maybe a couple of minutes, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, right? But I can do the same thing in 2 seconds, opening my terminal and just asking GPT-4 or GPT-3 in that case. So a lot of people that I've been looking at this, a lot of people are starting to use this GPT model just as a search engine by itself. So even though it does not give you any novel answer in a lot of scenarios, it still gives you the answer quicker than if you were to just Google it and go through web pages.
Okay, thank you.
And there is a comment of Diego Kozlowski. Do you want to say it, Diego, or I should read it?
Sure. Thanks, Ian, for the presentation. That was great. I just wanted to add that there is also a huge issue with the biases underlying these models, and they have been really good at making patches so the model cannot make a racist comment or a sexist comment, but those are and there are famous models that before they have these issues, but now they are covering this with, we don't know exactly how, but I'm pretty sure that the models still have all those biases within them in their training data, in their structure, but they are just covering it. So that's something that we should also be aware of and be careful when we use these models, because they have these underlying problems. And the fact that they are making the models closed and we don't know in which data they are trained or how they are fine-tuned and how these patches are made, it's even more complicated for this issue.
Yeah, this can be super dangerous, because imagine if people start adopting GPT-3 or GPT-4 models in their daily basis, and these GPT models have biases underlying them. And people just start adopting this, and it becomes part of culture. And suddenly you have those biases underlying these GPT models that now are becoming part of society. So that's in a really slow and creepy way, essentially. That would be super dangerous to happen. Yes.
Exactly. So actually, this is a question I wanted to ask about the evolution of those models, and because I mean there was an ethics director, right, in OpenAI, which has been fired, right, just recently, if the information is correct. And
so yeah, what happened is that the same day that GPT-4 was released, the whole department of ethics AI from their partner, which is Microsoft, was fired the same day that GPT-4 was released. which is a bit concerning, right? Because we know that GPT-4 is pretty much running on Microsoft servers, and they are both really closely related to one another. So, and some of those ethics AI personnel that they claimed that the reason why they were fired was because they were slowing the release of these new applications that use these large language models.
Yeah, and let's say paraphrasing what Diego said about this bias in data, I think this is the, as you correctly mentioned, this is the process that can be go deeper and deeper because then it will be a part of the society. People start to use it, and this will perhaps feed new generations of GPT models because new information will be generated, and it will dominate the amount of information that is being produced. So yeah, this can have a big influence.
Yes, I agree with you.
There's a comment from Diego. Ah, yes, he just found the information. Tim Gabru was the ethic director of Google, and she was also fired, also because of language models, also
I see.
in Google.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Competition starts to.
Yes, I see.
All right, so I think we are already at 11, but if there is any more comment or question, just.
Could I maybe do it also in the office at some point? But I have another question, which is maybe very generic and philosophical, because about creativity. Because so, for example, you gave an idea which I thought was very nice of having a refined GPT model on, let's say, biomedical data, for example, and then it could come to our, for example, when and also you gave at the beginning a very nice example of the poetry idea that, you know, you can basically ask a bot to create a poem, and then whether you like it or not is another story.
Yeah.
And also to write in a certain style and so on. So it asks the question for me, what really is creativity? Because when we do research, isn't that really the added value? And same thing for teaching. When someone learns something, they learn to become creative with the knowledge that they have. So they suppress in certain types of information from their frontal cortex, and then other information comes forward that becomes usable for creation. And I really don't know, for example, so that gives me a lot of questions. So for example, can we say that if we use ChatGPT is creating something, or is it simply doing linear combination or non-linear combination things that are already there? And then, can we discover stuff? Like, for example, if we give a plot and all the points are on a parabola, and we ask, what is the shape of this thing? Is it going to basically on its own figure out it's a parabola, or is it just going to tell us it looks like a cup? And how because if we can use it this way, I think for research it can be super useful, because maybe reveal patterns that the naked eye cannot reveal.
Yes,
it could be used for anything, for time series analysis, for all sorts of stuff.
Definitely. Yes, I can give you one example. For example, so I'm working on atomistic simulations, and we were searching for systems which exhibits more, let's say, a more
Jan, I think you are cut.
And
sorry, last 15 seconds were cut.
Okay, and it gave me a really, really nice answer that properly correlated with really nice systems that actually have some relevance to this. So it's able to do this, yes.
Yeah, it's really cool. So do you think, I mean, basically, if we gave, the motion of a pendulum, for example, there is this famous science paper where you have a double pendulum, and the AI is trying to figure out the Hamiltonian and try to figure out that the motion, I mean, the laws governing that motion come from, minimization of whatever, and this is the functional that you should minimize, and it looks like this, and is that actually something that sort of technology can do? Because it seems to me that math being a language, I mean, at least not according to Noam Chomsky, but maybe he's not right, I don't know. But then maybe you can play with the operators in the same way as you can play with the words, right? Is that true? Or
well, the problem with that is the numerical precision, because you need to sometimes you need to integrate equations that need to be super precise. But and ChatGPT and GPT models in general cannot be so precise in order to do that. But they are trying to mix together the GPT models with Mathematica. So they can use the outputs from Mathematica. Essentially, they can write code for Mathematica that solves this question precisely and look at the outputs from it and find correlations and conclusions from those outputs. So like a researcher would, essentially, we'll do exactly the same thing.
Okay, great. Super useful. Thank you so much, Ian. I'm done. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan, for the whole presentation and for answering our questions. And thank you all for participating in that discussion. It was, I think, super eyes-opening and useful to everybody, at least to me. So thank you so much, Jan, again. And I will keep you noted about the future seminars. One of the future seminars that has been, let's say, promised to me by Jan will be on his voice cloning technology that he is developing in his company. So it will be in some future, and it is somehow closely related to that topic as well.
Yes, definitely.
So yes, I will keep you informed, and that's all. Thank you so much. Have a good day, and
okay, thank you.
And thank you.
Have a good day. Bye.